I got a question.
Yeah.
So, well, first it's going to have some pre-qualifier context. So, Dr. Bradley has been coming out and working with the students in the service phase for the last year or so more, and he's doing a leadership course, which is like 4 weeks. Once a week, I believe on Mondays.
Half a day each time.
Half a day in the mornings. They do a leadership kind of 101 course, and then in the afternoons, a hermeneutics course. So it's really cool. He comes out, every week, and they all love it, and sometimes staff gets to sit in and they love it. And it's always like, even I sit in sometimes. Actually, I just come in and like mess with you, and then you mess with me back and make me look bad, and then I walk out. And so
call it a day.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's the way it's supposed to be. But I'm interested.
He sounds tough when there's witnesses.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. I walk in, I'm like, "What's up, old man?" And he's like, "Shut up. You lose this fight every time." But I'm curious, because I don't think I've ever, asked you this directly, like in your experience with the Narrowgate students, because you've gone through, 6 or 7 or 8 different classes of guys that have come through. Mm-hmm. What's the thing that keeps you coming back?
Well, 2 things really. And again, going back to my age, is when you see how much God has done in your life, and you're still healthy enough to keep going. You've got so much to die with. Okay, I don't want to die with it. I want to dump it all. So you start getting into a phase to where you're wanting to pour it back into the guys coming up behind you as hard as you can. Because a lot of these things, especially leadership, I learned through experience. You would think that you'd be taught a lot of leadership in the military. You're really not. You're given these responsibilities, and good luck. If you are lucky enough to really be working for a good officer, then, a lot of it'll rub off. You got a guy that you can come in and close the door and say, "Hey, listen, help me with this." I don't, so a lot of this is from experience, and a lot of it, I think what I enjoy the most is talking about my mistakes, but also how I use those mistakes and the things I did better later in my career. So a lot of it is anecdotal. This went on, and this was the situation, and this is how I handled it, and this is why, and this is how I would have done it if I did it again. Even though it went well, I would probably done it a little bit differently, and I'm drawing principles out of that. Just like I said earlier, a good leader is always in self-assessment mode. What are the traits of good leaders? All of that is what I've observed in good leaders, what I have learned sometimes the hard way. My dad was a good leader. He, the World War II veteran in the Navy, came back and immediately got into the Army Reserves and did 20 years there and retired in the Army Reserves. And he taught me a lot of leadership principles. And one of it, the biggest thing he taught me is you stand up for your people. You protect your people. What is that? That's shepherding.
Yeah.
And Dad didn't go to church, but it's the same principle, so I bit down on that pretty early. But why? Why stand up for your people? And the big one, how do you stand up for your people? So just all of the things, I just really love it, primarily because these guys are hungry, and they need it. They need somebody to say, okay, look, this is what this is about. This is how you do it. But one of the 4 days is leading through conflict.
That's huge. We all need a dose of that.
Another of the 4 days, complete day, is leading through change. One of the most dangerous things you'll do as a leader. So how do you do that? What kind of people are you going to be having to wrestle with? How do you speak truth to power? I left the class the other day because we're going to do change the next time we're together. And I drew the front half of a bell curve. And I said, okay, you just got hired as the new pastor of this church. The church is starting to take off. When do you start planning for change? And I just let that hang in the air. And I said, think about it. Talk among yourselves if you want, and we'll address it next time. So it is really fulfilling and a real blessing to not only have an opportunity to pour into the guys coming behind you and give them a leg up instead of having to learn all this themselves, if they ever do. In the military, it's like 3 lifetimes, because everybody's always moving. Every summer you lose a third of your people and you get a third new people you've never seen before. And then you're leaving. And you do that. I did that for almost 30 years. So how many people have I met? How many kinds of people working for me? Good guys, bad guys. I was working for them. All of that stuff. You just pick up a lot. And I've committed the rest of my life to pouring that into the generations coming up behind me, to where they can do better earlier. And that's what I'm all about.
So cool. I think one of the most the things that one of the best things about your leadership, teaching, and interactions with guys that are learning from you are you have a story or a real life experience that goes with all of these principles that you're talking about. And they're really easy to relate to, and they're really easy to see, and understand. It's like, oh, okay, that's not just a principle that you read in a leadership book. I can see how that would apply in my own life. And for me, I can think of 5 stories off the top of my head that you've told me that this story was the thing that embedded it in me. It wasn't just a quick, quote or a leadership principle that you would highlight in a book. It was like, no, this is what that looks like. And then I can think of several stories where I've experienced that in my own life, and it just builds on itself. So I've always appreciated that about your teachings and interactions and all that.
And a lot of times when I'll do that, I'll take them halfway through the story and then I'll stop and say, what would you do?
Yeah.
What would you do from here? This is you. What would you do now? And of course they don't know. And I know that. And I'm not trying to humiliate them or look smart or anything, but I want them to process that, because if I don't teach them this, they're going to have that stunned mullet look in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're a leader and they look like that in front of their guys, that's going to be hard to recover from. Yeah. So I want them to be confronted with it now. And I let it hang. What would you do? Yeah, I don't know. No, wrong answer. What would you do?
Yeah, it's not the best time to experience that for the first time is in the moment.
And then just go quiet. Tell me. And then once I've made that point, and they've struggled a little bit and maybe given me an answer or something, then we talk about the answer or refine the answer. Or, I try to create the simulated stories of their own. Lots of times these guys will say, man, that is just like my boss before I came to Narrowgate. Had that happen the other day. And the psychology of leadership is fascinating to me. How people lead, why they lead, why they do it the way they do it. And so much of that is who they really are. And that's what I lead off with in the leadership classes. I talk about how important it is. But I say that the most important thing is when you're leading, we find out who you really are.
Yeah.
And you find out who you really are.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be in situations to where, buddy, you better compromise. Buddy, you better put that in the drawer and not let anybody see it. But is that what you should do? And we go back to what will God bless?
That's good.